Today we're gonna make blonde brownies, and I'm gonna put dark chocolate chips and pecans in them, but you don't have to, you can just do the blonde brownie part. I've preheated the oven to 350 and I toasted my pecans at 350. They're still a little bit warm. They take about 5 minutes. These actually took 10 because they're super fresh. I ordered them from a farm in Georgia. So set the timer for 5 minutes and then look at them. You want them to look just a little bit darker and smell really nutty. Toasted pecans are fantastic. But first thing we're going to do is take 2 sticks of butter. And I always use unsalted butter in baking, but if salted is what you have, that's what you should use. And we're going to brown the butter because this gives flavor. I'm going to take my silicone spatula and we're going to stand over the heat for a minute. Want it on about medium heat. This is room temperature already, so it's not going to take very long to melt. And I'm going to keep it moving, and we're going to cook it until after it's melted and it begins to turn golden brown and is super fragrant. So this is going to take a couple minutes. Okay, now it's all melted, and we're going to keep cooking it until it starts to turn colors. You could have even a wider pan here if you wanted it. When you buy butter, think about what you want to pay for what you get. Cheaper butter tends to have more water in it, which means it's going to sizzle with this kind of treatment a lot more. More expensive butter usually has less water, so Irish butter or Plus Gras or something like that, that's really good for a butter-based baked good, like a shortbread or something like that. In this case, the water will boil out or sizzle out, but I think it's just easier to deal with butter that has less water in it. I have to keep moving the butter down from the sides of the pans because otherwise it's going to burn up there and impart bad flavor. And that's why you don't want the heat up too high, because if it's cooking the sides of the pan, you want the flavor to be coming from evenly golden brown milk solids. So the fat is melted into fat and milk solids, and it's the milk solids that are browning and going to impart some flavor. Make sure your spatula is silicone. Rubber will just melt with this kind of cooking. So it's starting to get just a little golden brown. We turn the camera off for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. And you don't want to walk away from the butter. It's gonna, when it goes browner, it's gonna go really quickly, and you've got to catch it before it burns. So better to undercook it than overcook it. But you can see on the sides of the pans there's some little brown flecks. Got to keep those down inside the butter. See how it's changing color. Hard to see through the foam. The shallower your pan is, the faster this will go, but also the faster it'll turn to going too far. So you've got to be really careful. That's why I do it a little deeper. I have more control. See how the foam is turning color? I can feel that there's some solids on the bottom of the pan. I can feel it with my spatula. It's also not making noise anymore, which means the water has sort of spattered its way out. I'm going to declare that brown. So let's see what it looks like. We're going to pour it into this glass bowl. The solids are probably a little darker than would be perfect, but as long as it smells nutty and not burned, it's fine. So there you go, browned butter. We're gonna let that cool while we do some of this other stuff. The 9x9 square pan. I've got a piece of wax paper with some butter on it. And I'm going to butter the pan. The butter, you could use oil or you could even use, you know, a spray canola oil or something like that. But the butter just adds to the flavor. I have already traced the bottom of the pan and cut it out of that parchment paper. So I'm going to fit the paper in the bottom after I've greased it, and then I'm going to grease the paper. If you don't have parchment paper, you can use wax paper for this. So once it goes in there, you put a little bit more butter on top. And this is really so that you can get them out of the pan. If you're just going to eat these right out of the pan, you don't really have to do this, but I think it helps. So there we go. Greased all around. And while the butter keeps cooling a little bit, it's still pretty hot. Actually, I think it's the bowl that's hot now. We're going to do 1.5 cups of brown sugar. Anytime you are using brown sugar, you have to pack it in just to get the air out. This is dark brown sugar, which is what you want because you're enhancing the flavor to go along with the brown butter. And we're going to do 1.5 cups. While I'm waiting for the butter to cool a little more, I'm going to break up these pecans. You can do this with a mallet or something like that, but I like to do it by hand. Essentially, I'm taking each half into about 4 pieces because I like the bigger pieces, especially when they're toasted. You don't want to put them in the batter when they're still hot, and anyways, you don't want to do this with your fingers while they're still hot. But these are nice and cool already. Okay, 2 teaspoons of vanilla, and putting this in the butter will help finish cooling it off. Been going through vanilla pretty fast in this house. I'm going to put the sugar in, 1.5 cups of packed dark brown sugar, and a teaspoon of kosher salt. You got to watch out with kosher salt. There's 2 kinds out there. Diamond Crystal, which is what this is, and Morton, and they don't measure the same. So pay attention to that a little bit, although honestly, in this recipe, the salt doesn't matter very much. I'm going to whisk it to get it mixed up and make sure there's no lumps in the brown sugar. So make sure it's not too hot. You don't want it to cook your eggs here. Two eggs. And mix these up. And then we're going to add the flour. Remember how you're measuring the flour. Just spooning it in, scraping it off the top. There's 1 cup. And this is 3/4 of a cup. It's a 1/2 teaspoon baking powder, but it's good to put that in with the flour because you want it to mix around as thoroughly as possible. And I'm going to get this started this way, and then I'm going to add my mix-ins. You can put in anything you want, any kind of nuts. You could put in raisins, you can put in chocolate, you can put whatever you want. But I am going to put dark chocolate because these are so sweet that milk chocolate or dark chocolate is just a good foil for the sweetness. First I'm going to extract my whisk without taking too much batter with me. So let's just see how much I sort of eyeballed the pecans. Let's see if it's about 1 cup. A little short of 1 cup, that's good. And then good quality, extra dark chocolate. And then I'm just folding these in. You can see how sticky this batter looks, and that's because there's so much sugar in it. And putting sugar in batter, not only does that do something for taste, but sugar tends to help hold moisture. So there's a lot of fat and a lot of sugar, so these are going to be moist and gooey. It's warm today, and these chocolate chips, anyways, even apart from a warm day, melt pretty well. So there's a little bit of melting going on, which will make these taste yummy through and through. So note the color, that's because we browned the butter. That's not the darkest dark brown sugar I've ever seen, but that's also contributing to the color. So these are going to bake for 20 to 27 minutes. 20 minutes if you want them pretty chewy and gooey, which I don't. So I think I'm going to go for 22 minutes and then start checking them after that. Before these go in the oven, I'm going to put a little bit of flaky sea salt on top because, again, that's a really good foil for the sweetness. These are big flakes. I'm going to crunch them up a little bit with my fingers. Not too much, just to get a little bit of that on your tongue when you put them in your mouth. I'm probably going to use a half a teaspoon at the most. I let one big chunk fall there. All right, center of the oven. All right, this has probably been maybe even 25 minutes. The flaky sea salt didn't go anywhere. It's coming away from the edges just a tiny bit, and it feels pretty firm, so I'm going to declare that done. So we're going to let those cool before we eat them. Gooey and yummy on the inside, but not too gooey. There's the rest of the one we lost. Guess I'll have to eat it. You're gonna have to pause it right here. Did you want to eat some more of those pecans while we're making this? Did you want some of these too?
I got one, thanks.